The answer to this question really depends on the lens through which you're considering the question and considering what are assets. From a community perspective, there's a number of assets or community resources in the town of Grant that can be used or are being used to improve the quality of community life. First is really the unique individuals that reside in the town of Grant or own property in the town, and the unique skills and abilities they bring to the community. For a few weeks, I stood on the road by the transfer station to meet and talk with electors, and I really met a lot of unique individuals. I met truck drivers and engineers, railroad workers, artists and teachers, skilled trades workers, and accountants. We really have quite a few long-term residents also in the town who have a wealth of historical knowledge, and that was really evidenced in the sesquicentennial celebration and the publication of a written history of much of that historical knowledge. In addition to all of the people assets, are the numerous businesses that we have in the town, the religious, recreational, civic, and social organizations. We have a church and a school, as well as a large number of agriculturally focused firms. And then, along with all of our natural land, green space, and water resources, we also have a managed natural area in the Buena Vista Wildlife Area and the numerous state natural areas that are contained within it, including the Buena Vista Prairie Chicken Meadow and the Buena Vista Quarry. Now, if you haven't been to the Buena Vista Quarry Prairie, it's really quite a neat place, and it's one of the least disturbed tracts in the entire wildlife area. That wildlife area includes many recreational opportunities, including birding, hiking, cross-country skiing, snowshoeing, hunting and trapping, foraging for wild edibles, wildlife viewing, and even geocaching. Yet another community asset that we have in the town of Grant is a transfer station with a strong commitment to have available recycling and repurposing for used items rather than simply having everything just thrown into a common trash dumpster. And then from another lens, the town has quite a few municipal assets. So that would be the property, plant, and equipment that's owned or controlled by the town, used by the government for the good of the town. That's the tangible and intangible physical infrastructure, which is managed directly or indirectly to benefit the citizens in the attainment of our local service delivery goals. Town of Grant assets would include the road systems, town-owned buildings, the land, heavy equipment, their credit rating of the town, as well as operational items like our current inventory of consumables, as well as our human resources or employees. Without having comprehensive input from our stakeholders or our citizens, my personal opinion is that we have some real opportunity to develop our municipal asset management process. The town could recognize efficiencies in service delivery and cost savings if there was a better management system in place, as well as using and having data to review like inventory, valuation, use, and strategic plans as part of our strategic decision-making process.
First, well, we're a township that's slightly different than other townships. We're 2 townships long, 1 township wide, so we're 6 by 12 miles versus your typical township of 6 by 6. So that means we have a lot of land and a lot of resources in our township that we have to manage. So that's a good thing, and it can also be a negative thing because it requires more work than your typical town. But we're not that heavily populated, so it's very doable. Other than that, we have people are our greatest resource there. We have a very diverse group of townspeople. We all know each other. It's kind of nice. There's a lot of multi-generational families that are friends out there. They've been there. Some have been there since their farms were homesteaded, which is very neat. And then we got a great bunch of water resources, streams. A lot of the drainage ditches are actually trout water. We have some really neat little downtown area with some businesses. We've got Grant School and the Ball Diamonds where we grew up, and we always played pickup ball games there. So yeah, we got things to offer, and it's a good community.
Well, the main assets in the town of Grant is the diversity of the people involved in the town, the great crew we have as far as a town crew and the equipment that we have, that we can do a lot of these small projects, whether they be road projects or clearing brush and that kind of stuff, by ourselves. We don't have to hire somebody to get it done. And if we do have professionals that live in our township that are an asset to us.
Right now, what I think is the main issue, there's multiple issues, but the main one is restoring some civility in the town government, between the town government and the folks, making sure that, we can communicate and have differences of opinions without trying to admonish someone for it. The other thing we got, because we have a lot of water resources, we have a lot of bridges. And a lot of our bridges are older and not in good shape. So we definitely need to look at some type of planning for how we're gonna handle these bridges in the future. Bridges are not cheap, they're very expensive per foot. So it's something you just don't do on a whim, you gotta plan. And I think one of the first things we should do is come up with a plan for bridge replacements. There are grants available for the replacement of them, as long as you have a plan. So having a plan would open the doors up for some grant money, so we're not spending all our taxpayer dollars on those expensive projects, and we can just gives us more latitude with our tax dollars. Maybe here's a really novel idea, maybe not spend all the tax dollars in a year. That would be great. We got, that's a big issue for me. Roads are always an issue for everybody. And then I think like the water quality and the quality of life there, all of our residents have septic systems and private wells. We have this part of the state in essential sands has some of the highest nitrogen contamination of groundwater than anywhere else in the state. That's worth looking into. And again, there's a number of other areas in the Central Wisconsin Township, or Central Wisconsin Plains, that are experiencing the same thing. So it's one of those things we can work with other towns, other communities, other organizations, and try to find some synergy there. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. So
The main challenge that the town has to address is probably right now is the conflicts at the town board meetings all the time between the board and our clerk and treasurer, and not always seeing eye to eye with everybody and arguing in public. Now, it's fine to have a disagreement, but let's keep them civil and speak civilly to each other all the time.
The town, like almost every other government entity, is tasked to do more with less. The municipality is charged to provide more and better services, more timely responses, and using accurate data to inform our decision making to serve the broadest demographic and to be as inclusive as possible. To meet those challenges, we need to work smarter and not harder. We need to modernize our systems, create efficiencies in communication, and the ability for citizens to easily access information that they need when they need it. The town needs to offer more opportunities to get input from stakeholders, to develop priorities, and to set our strategic directions. We need to be transparent about allocation of resources and to be much more proactive in seeking opportunities to increase our available resources, such as through grant opportunities, partnerships, or collaborations.
Well, one of the things that I believe can be introduced is during our meetings we have a public input section where the public has the right to speak, which is a good thing. But by going to the county board meetings and other township meetings, I've noticed that if you want to speak at a meeting, you get put on the agenda. And I think that's a very simple solution to get a lot of the bickering taken care of, have a person put something on the agenda that they want to speak about and what it is and why they need to, or why they want it addressed. It's a simple, straightforward solution.
Well, if you've gone to any of the recent board meetings, if you've watched on Zoom, or if you've listened to the cassette tapes, yes, cassette tapes, an example where we can modernize, you've likely observed a very fractionated system of operation, one in which the chairperson, who in Chapter 60.13 of the Wisconsin State Statute is charged to maintain order and decorum, is repeatedly derelict in that duty. Audience members have been allowed on various occasions to raise their voices, berate, and demonstrate extreme disrespect for the elected clerk and treasurer, as well as other audience members. Elected supervisors have shown the same contempt for common decency, complacency for common courtesy, and disregard for statute. The first step to combat this is for elected officials to learn the rules of parliamentary procedure. That's the body of ethics, rules, and customs governing meetings, as well as to remember some of the rules we probably all learned back in kindergarten about treating others the way that we want to be treated. Somewhere along the way, we all have to work with people that we just don't like, who we don't think are doing their jobs, but that doesn't give us the right to treat them poorly.
Great question. The biggest thing to remember is the civility begins with the town board. That sets the tone for any conversation you're going to have with somebody. Are you going to, even if they're not civil, you have to be. In my current position where I work full time for the state, I'm in a non-regulatory role. However, I have to work with a number of constituents, a number of groups, very diverse groups with different opinions. And I've been in the hot seat many, many times. And the first thing I know when I'm up there is I can control the tone of that conversation, even in the most contested cases that come up. It all depends on how you handle it. And like I said, if somebody's even being silly, because there are differences of opinions, if people are very passionate about certain things, well, when they are, you got to understand that, and you got to employ empathy. You need to know, okay, well, if I'm in their position, how would I feel about this? And that's what I do. And I've had tons of training on it, on this kind of thing, and I've tons of experience with it. And I think that's important because everybody's opinion matters, whether you like it or not. And sometimes you may even have to vote that way, even if you don't like it. But that's the way it is. You represent the people, all people. That's another good question. Thanks for that. First, it's your responsibility in a position like this to do due diligence and know the background of an issue coming up. Information's power. You need to have as much information as you can going into the situation. I look at it as research as a research project, like I do any other projects that I work with in my full-time job, is gather as much information as you can, get it together, talk about it with other people, and come up with, formulate the best situation or best situation to handle it. It might be a compromise, it may not be a compromise, it might be an improvement. And the beauty of that is you're getting input from other folks and you're learning something new yourself. And something I always told my two boys is it's not a good day unless you learn something. So when you do this kind of stuff, not only is it your duty, you benefit from it yourself, and as well as the community, because now they know you did due diligence. They know you gave it plenty of thought. They know that you're with them, and if they came in with a different opinion, they might leave with a different one after they get all the information. And that's important. You have to have buy-in. I don't care what it is. If we could put speed limit signs up all over the place, and if you don't have the police to do enforcement, it doesn't happen. So you need people to understand why those speed limits are there. It's the same thing with any other issue. Folks got to understand what everything entails, and it's your job to get that information for them.
Well, in my opinion, that's kind of a trick question, because some of the important things that come up, you get a notice a day before. So you have to act on them immediately. Some of the pressing issues, You know, if we get it this month and want to make a decision by next month, then you spend as much time as possible researching the answers and trying to come up with the correct answers.
So this is really a difficult question, I think, to quantify and answer because it really depends on what the issue is and the baseline knowledge that any given individual has about the issue. I think a leader has to be invested enough to learn about the issues as well as investigate alternative viewpoints. Sometimes this will be done in advance of a meeting. Sometimes it will require some research on your own, but sometimes it will happen during meeting deliberations. As an example of researching an issue, I'm going to use the next question, actually, that we've been asked to answer about the county's initiative to get all wells in the town tested. I hadn't previously heard about that goal, and I've researched on the county website, but so far I can't corroborate that statement as a confirmed initiative. I've been reading through the Portage County Groundwater Management Plan, which was authored in 2017, but I've yet to see a goal that specifically includes that initiative of getting every well in the town tested and for free. Admittedly, I have not finished reading the entirety of the plan yet, nor have I contacted Portage County Planning and Zoning to learn more about the current status of the action items that have been identified as part of those overarching objectives.
Yes, because I believe nitrates in our water in the town of Grant is a big concern for the citizens.
So to the point of supporting an initiative to get all the wells in the town tested for free, I'd really need some more information. I'd like to know more about what kind of testing will be conducted. Is this going to be a simple nitrate nitrogen screening? Something that will give us a little bit of information? Or are we talking about something more comprehensive that's going to include data about the presence or absence of coliform bacteria, as well as more precisely quantified nitrate nitrogen values, and maybe even some information about other water quality indicators? Maybe they're talking about even more comprehensive testing that would include information about levels of metals, triazines, other pesticides or herbicides, or even pharmaceuticals. At face value, this question about supporting well testing might seem simple, but when you dig a little deeper, you have to ask more questions. What will it cover? Where is the funding ultimately going to come from? Because we all know there's no such thing as a free lunch. The money has to come from somewhere. And how is the data going to be shared and how will it be used?
Yes, and I'll tell you what. I mentioned it briefly before. This part of the state, the Central Sands region, has some of the highest nitrogen concentration in groundwater and surface water in the state. Part of that is because our surface water and groundwater are connected almost very closely because of our formations here. It's all sand. It's what they call unconfined aquifers. So the water that goes to these ditches comes directly fed from groundwater. There's not a lot of runoff, so to speak. So what our groundwater quality is reflects what our surface water quality is. And the groundwater quality affects our drinking water, which affects the surface water, that affects the aquatic plants everywhere. Lake Wazeecha is not in the town of Grant, but a lot of us use it. That also contributes downstream. It affects all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. It's a huge amount of nitrogen that comes in this area. I've done tons of monitoring on it. We're working on different projects now in the Central Sands and other areas, how to combat it. And it's going to happen. We got, like I said before, we have every house is supplied or serviced by a septic system. That's a source of nitrogen. Lawn chemicals, lawn fertilizers are commercial fertilizers, and agriculture is. What are we doing, or what can we do working together to reduce the amount we apply? And that's how we're going to reduce it. So yeah, I would definitely support some type of project that would sample everybody's water in the town of Grant. But I'd like to first collaborate with some other folks and find out how to pay for this. I know there's different groups, different counties and townships working together. When I worked as an undergrad and graduate student at UWSP, we did these drinking water programs, which they're still in existence, and they're great ways to get information. and it's very affordable. I've spoke to many people about this already, because it seems like every election, the roads are the issue in the town, and they're important, but you need a plan, and it goes back to what I was talking about with those bridges. We're in a unique position because we do have so many stream crossings. We should have a plan for that, just like you have a plan for roads. Not only a plan, but then implementation of that plan, making sure it happens according to plan, not decide to do a part of a road because you know somebody or something. Like, you got to stay on task, stay on plan. We had some roads now that are just plain dangerous this time of year as the frost is coming out of the ground. That's unacceptable. It's been like that for decades, and somebody's going to get hurt, and we shouldn't wait until that point. It's better be proactive than reactive. So I would definitely look at a multi-year plan for the roads and actually adhere to it and make sure the implementation occurs with the appropriate grants that are available. We need to apply for grants. End of story. That keeps our tax liability down for property owners. It also, right now we're putting more money into the state than we're getting back. So we need to at least balance out, in my opinion. And if the money's there, I think we can compete fairly well on those grants. I write grants now for a number of other things. And the previous chairperson also wrote lots of grants. It can be done. And it can be done well. And I think that's the way we do this. We have a plan, so we know so we know what roads we're going to do. We have the numbers up front, understanding they can change as cost of materials change over time. And then apply for the grants to implement that plan. That's how we should be doing things. This isn't something, you don't play, or you don't do things off the hip with that much money, townspeople money. And it gives the townsfolk, if you have a good plan, it gives town folks time to read it over and make suggestions or edits and come back to us with it. That's what I envision. How do we manage the roads, is get town input, figure out what the priorities are going to be, what needs to be done for safety reasons, apply for the grants, and implement. Actually do the road construction.
I'm going to tackle the transfer station first. Them 2 employees that we have out there need a little better place for in the summer to get out of the weather, and in the wintertime to get out of the cold. We need a better permanent building out there where they can come in and warm up in the winter, and like I say, if it's raining or whatever in the summer, they got a place to get out of the weather. There's no need for them to sit out there in their cars all the time to try and stay warm. I know we do not have power there, and the cost of getting power there may be astronomical, but I believe it's something we should investigate. And as far as the roads, we need to let our road crew do more on the roads as far as fixing them ourselves. We have 2 very talented people, 1 full-time employee and 1 part-time grader operator that has the experience on how to build roads and build them properly. We just need to let them do their job, not interfere with them so much.
The first step to improve the transfer station or to improve local roads is to do an assessment to understand the current state. In the case of the roads, there should really be a road inventory that's updated at least twice a year via a rubric used to assign values to qualities or features of each road, so that each road can be compared against itself over time, as well as to similar roads. And then based on stakeholder input, which may include town residents, groups representing certain use cases like ATV clubs or farmers, as well as neighboring municipalities, then decisions can be made on resource allocation and needs for maintenance, repair, or upgrade to the roads. For the transfer station, safety and ease of use are primary concerns. And I think that we need to start with asking questions, surveying both the users and the employees of the transfer station. I bet they have a lot of thoughts and a lot of observations. Employees and residents have probably noticed opportunities for improvements and things that probably can be made quickly and at low cost. So it's really some of those first low hanging fruit ideas that we need to implement, and that will start us on the road to making incremental improvements before we start working on bigger projects or longer term improvements. The town has many opportunities to improve communication and encourage participation by residents. One important way that I've actually been working on with a small group of individuals is to provide remote or virtual meeting access so that residents can watch and participate in all variety of town meetings, either by computer or by phone. So far, this has only been implemented for the last few board meetings, but the technology could easily be used for plan commission meetings as well as annual meetings. This allows residents who may be homebound or who have young children and just really don't go out later in the evening, or who are currently limiting their in-person participation to be included in some of these decisions and conversations related to their community. The town also has an opportunity to restore the use of periodic newsletter. Whether that's monthly, bi-monthly, or quarterly, it could be delivered either in hard copy or electronic formats. And email addresses could be collected and used, collected either by direct mail solicitation or by a sign-up portal on the website. We could collect that information so that it could be used to distribute that information, and those that wish to receive it electronically could do so and save the town some mailing costs. In addition to that, the town could also implement online portals for open records requests as well as zoning requests. By collecting this information through a portal into a database, rather than in personal emails or through messages left on personal phones, now we have a centralized record, a record where we can if something happens to someone, we know, we can go back, we can know what the status was. But it can also be reviewed on a regular basis to make sure that requests are being met in a timely fashion and being met consistently. And then finally, in addition to our static website, which we have, which is great, we're fortunate to have someone who updates that for us very regularly and in a timely fashion. We could also start using some social media platforms. We know that a lot of people are on social, and we can use that to push information out to residents, so it shows up automatically on a platform that they're familiar with receiving information on already.
That's a difficult question to answer also, because between myself and one of the other candidates running for supervisor, we introduced the Zoom meetings, got them going. The most important thing that we need to do is either get an ordinance passed or something so that our clerk always has our meeting minutes done, and they should be done within 24 hours of the last meeting so that everybody can read them, all the board members, and get them posted on the website within 24 hours of the last meeting so that the whole town can read them and know what's going on in our township. We're operating now, we have had board meetings the last 3 months where we haven't had meetings for 3 or 4 months of meetings, so and that's not acceptable.
Yeah, so one thing 2020 taught us was that remote access actually works, or working remotely because we have the technology. So, I, in my current job, I would sometimes drive an hour, hour and a half, sometimes 2.5, 3 hours for an all-day meeting. Where now it's totally acceptable and just as efficient, more efficient to do it via Zoom or Skype or something else. We have the technology, we should use it. And last week the town meeting was cut short, but it was done on Zoom, so there was 13 folks watching from home, which once the word gets out and we do more of it, it would become more commonplace. And as long as I think the board should be there in person, but at least allow some of the folks, we do have a number of elderly people, if they can't get out for some reason, at least they can attend via Zoom if they have it. So that's one way I would definitely improve communications. The other way is just talking to people and being open to new ideas. That's how we're going to move things forward and just kind of get over this vitriol situation we're in now. So there's other ways. I mean, there's plenty of ways to improve communication, and I'm open to new ideas, looking forward to addressing that. But technology is one, and then I think just good old-fashioned common courtesy is another way to improve communications. Yeah, great question. Probably the most important one. It's pretty simple. I care about the people in town of Grant. It's my hometown. I grew up here. I know most of these people. Don't always agree with certain things, but I totally respect their opinion. But I think I bring some things that other candidates don't have. I got a good background in natural resources. And I'd like to apply that, and I currently work in a position, I have been for years, but the current position is working with large groups and communities to bring them together and solve problems. That's what I do for a living. And I would love to bring that to the town of Grant. I'm very fiscally conservative. I don't like spending money unless I have to. And my neighbor's money is just as important to me as my money. And I think we should, as a town supervisor, you need to explore every possible way to save tax money and not spend it unless you have to. I think sometimes folks forget that. They figure that if you don't spend it, you're going to lose it, which might be the case sometimes. Then of course, we might as well spend it, because we can't save it. But if you can carry it over to the next year, that would be a preference of mine for sure. One of the ideas I thought I have was to, if we can be conservative about our spending, do what we need to protect everybody. But if there is money left over, there's two options. One is to carry that over for another year for other projects, or lower the tax levy. Problem with that being that if we lower that tax levy, it's going to be hard to bring it back up again if you have to. Another option would be to put the money aside for like a rainy day fund, and just to cover any shortfalls or something in the future. We have debt. We've had debt in the past. We don't need that. We should be at a balanced budget and operate that way as well. So on the money side, that's my push there. I do want to bring civility back. I think we need to have more folks attending the meetings. Some don't because they just feel like they get talked down to or whatever. We got to change that. Want to open up more with technology so other folks can at least listen in or participate by sending in a chat. Have somebody there to recite it for the group. There's nothing wrong with that. I think our transfer station's working well. We need to do some improvements just for the staff that work there. It's not easy being out in those elements. You can have super cold days or you can have super hot days out there, and it's not a lot of fun sometimes, but they're always there. It seems like they're always there in a good mood, ready to help. And dump day is kind of an important day in the town of Grant. So, it's actually kind of a day for folks to socialize. Some people meet there. Some people meet at one of the pubs later on. It's kind of a town of Grant thing, but nonetheless, there's some improvements I would like to do there. We do an excellent job with recycling in the town of Grant. And yeah, that may not save us a ton of money. It saves us some because we're not paying that landfill space. But it also saves the surrounding communities money because now that's not space being taken up in a landfill, which means some other group isn't paying for a new landfill someplace else. So it's one of those instances. It's a good idea. I just am really impressed with how well Town of Grant recycles for everything. And people just get it, they do it. So that's, I'd like to maintain those kind of things. I'd like to bring in some more, I'd like to talk about a little bit more about the quality of life for folks. How can we improve it? I don't think in the 21st century here that anybody should be, us out there should be drinking water that's not safe. There's little babies in our township that don't need that, as well as any elderly folks. So I'd like to take a look a little bit at that, and we have the resources, and it wouldn't cost the town much money, if any at all, if we had the grants to do it. So there's a lot of things on the wish list, but those are some of the more important ones. So that's why I think folks should give me a chance and let me show you what we can do, and I think you'll be satisfied.
Well, I think they should vote for me because I personally feel that I've been doing a good job in the leadership role of the town, and the people that I've talked to, that there's a lot of people that agree with me. I've got things done there, such as cleaning up the 2 Mile Creek so that it doesn't flood anymore on residents. I've helped on a few of the road projects. And in the last 10 years I worked for Verso. I was a working leader for my crew, so I feel I have a lot of leadership capabilities. Also, as an officer on the first responder squad there, I'm a leader for our first responder rescue teams. Been working as a team member of the Grand Rapids Fire Department for almost 30 years, so I know how to work as a team member and get along with the rest of the team. So.
I have a great deal of experience in the government sector, particularly in the areas of program development and fiscal responsibility. I think the town really has a tremendous opportunity to strengthen its position in the areas of human resource management, asset tracking, and the use of data to inform its decision making for resource allocation. And I have both the experience and the skills to move those initiatives forward. I have the skills and experience to help implement modernized software platforms and quality-focused practices that can help the town use resources in more efficient ways. And I've also written and been involved in writing dozens of awarded grant applications, and I'm willing to offer that expertise to the town so we don't have to outsource that anymore, so we don't have to pay to have someone else write to get us money. I know how to listen to people and help find solutions rather than to simply avoid or try to find others to blame. I look forward to the opportunity to serve the residents of the town of Grant, and please remember to vote on April 6th. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you to Wisconsin Rapids Community Media and to the League of Women Voters of the Wisconsin Rapids area for the opportunity to speak to you today. The question has been asked is, what are the assets and how can those assets be developed? I think for any community, really anywhere, that the greatest assets is always the people that live, reside, work in that community. I think that's number one. And for us, the second thing is the land on which we all inhabit in the town of Grant. So I'd like to speak about the people first. We have some great people here. We have about 2,000 residents, and many of them have lived here their entire lives. So they have this storied history in the town that's really important. And many of them came out in droves, really, for our sesquicentennial in 2014, and we got to see our wonderful history and the people that made us who we are. But we also have some young families with, young couples with young children, and they take advantage and go to Grant Elementary School. We have teachers, we have great businesses, we have restaurants, we have bars, we have dog grooming places, dog boarding places, we have people that process meat, we have taxidermists. We have really things from soup to nuts that's really kind of exciting. They kind of befit our rural community. And those are really wonderful things to have in a town. I think for the most part, people are kind to one another, but they like their isolation to a certain extent. They like the rural atmosphere. But we also have, small subdivisions where there's people that can interact with themselves, close to their neighbors. And we have others who like to be far, far apart in a way. So I think it's neat that we have such a diversity in our town, and we're a hub for those people that commute to even Wausau, Marshfield, in Rapids, Stevens Point, and parts south. So we kind of are a nice mix. The other thing we have is an extraordinary landscape. People that might be driving through where you're kind of flat and uninteresting, but the fact of the matter is we have a remarkable natural resources. We are very rich in groundwater, as folks know, and because of that, we can host a vast agricultural industry. The vegetable and potato growers, for example, is a vast industry here in the town of Grant. But the flip of that is that we also have the Buena Vista Wildlife Area, which is the largest grassland complex east of the Mississippi River. And because of that, we harbor this immense wildlife complex. So we have all kinds of species of plants and animals. And so we have people that recreate on those lands, whether they hunt, they fish, they trap, they walk, they cross-country ski, they bird, they do their dog trialing. There's all kinds of benefits to having kind of this mix of great ag and great protected land as well. So I think we have great assets. And how some of those can be developed is to not only the enjoyment of the natural resources that we have here and the agricultural benefits that we have here, but also is to engage more people in all of those things. And if you've not been involved in town government, there are opportunities to serve the town, whether it's on the Plan Commission, whether it's on the Board of Adjustments, whether it's working at the transfer station, maybe it's being a part-time employee on roads, or it's just getting more engaged on a volunteer basis. We have a groundwater committee. We have people that are on the groundwater committee for Portage County. There's other ad hoc committees that we can add to do things that people are interested in. So I think the opportunities are also immense for people to get engaged. So the assets are the people, and the assets are the land in which we live in the town of Grant. Well, I think the things in my years of serving before, and I haven't mentioned that previously, is I did serve as the Town of Grant chairperson from 2005 to 2019, April to April. And I must say that the thing I heard the most concerns about always are the roads. That's the thing that we spend the most amount of money on. That's the thing that people utilize the most, and it's things in which we have the most complaints and concerns. So that's the thing I must say that we probably have to continue to expend and be most concerned about. As many people will attest, there are places in the town of Grant where perhaps roads should never have been created. We live in a very wet area in some parts, and because of that, our roads are prone to, they're really made up of just sandy or really muck soils. And the result of that is sometimes they're very difficult to pass. And sometimes if more expensive maintenance has been done on them or hard surfacing has been done on them, is sometimes they don't last unless they've been properly created in the first point. So the things I've done and done successfully, although certainly not to the extent it could be, is to write grants for road maintenance and road construction and reconstruction. I have to say that hasn't happened in the last 2 years. In the last 2 years, the current board has not written one grant for the purposes of our roads. To give you an idea, we'll get about $278,000 from the state of Wisconsin for road aid in any year. So we get we get over $2,000 per mile of road in the town of Grant, of which we have 116 miles. That's immense. Most towns are only 36 square miles, and they have between 40 to 60 miles of roads. We have 71.2 square miles, and we have 116 miles of roads. We're one of the largest towns in the state of Wisconsin, and for a rural town, we have a lot of roads. So considering we only get about $278,000 a year from the state of Wisconsin from road aid, to give you an example, it costs nearly $250,000 just to pave a half a mile of road. So that gives you the perspective of how difficult it is for us to adequately maintain this wide complex of roads that we have. So as a result, only about a third of our roads are even hard surfaced, whether it's chip seal or asphalted in some cases, but rare cases. So the things I did every year with the help of some of my former board members is to write as many grants as we could. So in the 2 years previous to the current board, I wrote over $500,000 worth of grants. That is absolutely pivotal to giving us the monies that we need in order to at least barely keep up. And people would argue that you're not keeping up. And it will take several lifetimes or tens of thousands, if not millions and millions of dollars for us to get them to the maintenance level that they need to be. But that is the best thing. That's the biggest issue in the town, in my opinion. It's the one that needs to be worked on the most. It's the one in which I feel skilled and that I can successfully write grants as I have in the past. So I think that would be the answer to that question. Well, I think for those people that have attended meetings in the last couple of years, they could argue that there has not been a great level of civility at the meetings. I find this particularly disconcerting, as I think that is very much the role of a chairperson. A chairman or woman has to be able to maintain order at a meeting. That's really their primary reason for being there. They're supposed to know how to preside over a meeting. That's important. They need to know how to use Robert's Rules of Order or other similar rules of protocol in order to hold a meeting and keep a meeting in check. There has been a lot of barbs thrown in the last couple of years. And when I was chairperson, I had the rules of civility. They were, I think they were even sticking up in this office here in community media. And the League of Women Voters oftentimes uses those as well, is that there are just really levels of politeness that you need to show to your fellow folks in the assembly that you respect their opinion, and it can be completely different than what you might personally believe, but you still have to respect other people in the room, other people in the assembly. To me, this is something that a chairperson really must uphold. And in my many years of being on the board, I think I maybe used a gavel twice. And there were times when I felt as if, you wanted to throw someone out of the hall. But I think you have to be able to maintain decorum in the room and keep people, friendly with one another. So how to maintain that? I think by electing me, we will be able to resume a level of civility that is more befitting the town of Grant. We're nice people, we're good people. We should be able to respect each other even if we don't agree with one another. Yeah, thank you for the question. This is a really good question, and there are a lot of complex issues. I would like to give two examples, if that's all right. The one example is ATVs and UTVs, and that was first brought to the town board's attention back in 2008. And at that time, I did hold a special meeting, and it was very well attended. There were petitioners that brought forward a request for ATVs and UTVs on town roads. there was a lot of questions, and we had a big nominal group session, and there was lots and lots of questions, all that were printed out. And I think for the most part, they remain unanswered. So the board never moved forward on a formal drafting of an ordinance at that time. The subject itself came back in 2016. We held another special meeting. There were petitioners that again asked that we consider opening some of the roads to ATVs and UTVs. So at that time, I directed the Plan Commission to begin drafting an ordinance back in 2016, and that's exactly what they did. The Plan Commission, of which I was a part, did work for probably 5 or 6 months on drafting an ordinance. And that ordinance was based on other ordinances from around the state of Wisconsin. They had several templates that they used, and they were all different, but all very interesting. And we tried to cherry pick the best part of each of the ordinances that we reviewed, and that was thanks to a chairman at the time of the Plan Commission, Jim Wendels, who did an expert job of helping us pick the best ordinance that we could to put together, which ensured hopefully the safety of the roads, also allowed us to connect to the businesses, etc. And so that ordinance, which was put together in 2016, was done at the request of the Saratoga ATV group in order to make singular connecting routes between the village of Plover, the town of Plover, the town of Pine Grove, and the town of Saratoga, all of which had, Pine Grove was the only town that had all their roads open at the time, to connect those municipalities that had ATV or UTV routes with the town of Grant. And that was successfully passed in 2016. And it was passed again in 2017 and 2018 with additional routes added. The complexity of this is that there were a lot of people saying, I want my roads open. I want to be able to get to other communities that have ATV routes. But there were also people in the town, particularly of those selected roads that were chosen, that were saying, I don't want any ATVs on my roads. In fact, in a couple cases, there were individuals who moved here for communities that had ATVs, like the town of Rome, and said, I specifically moved to the town of Grant because I didn't want to be in a community with ATVs and UTVs. So, and there were, at the same time, I was being, bombarded, for lack of a better word, by those who didn't want them, as well as those who did want them. And at the same time, we were being given information from those manufacturers of the machines that were saying they are not designed to be on particular hard surface roads. So the issue isn't so much of whether you want ATVs or UTVs, but what is the responsibility of the town to provide recreation for individuals who want that. It isn't necessarily the responsibility of a town to provide recreation on a public entity, which is the road, which is primarily for vehicles, but it's also for people who are on their bikes, or people who are walk, or people who might be on a horse. So what is our responsibility as a town? And it also brought up the very real issues of liability. Even though towns have limited liability on vehicular traffic on their roads, it still brought a certain vulnerability to the town. And at the time, my fellow supervisors both lived on county roads. So it was easy for them to say yes because it was something that didn't affect them. I was the only person at the time that lived on a town road. And so it seemed that my no vote, even though the ordinance passed because you only need 2/3 majority, I was still somehow blamed, I guess, for not allowing ATVs when that wasn't the case. Every time this came before the board, the ordinance did pass. So it was complex for so many different reasons, because we were getting, yes, I want them, no, I don't want them, they're safe, they're not safe, I live on this road, so I don't care, but you live on this road, I do care. And then there was the issue of liability. In the end, what happened is that we were asked to have a referendum on ATVs and UTVs with 3 questions asked. You don't want them at all, I want them on select routes, I want them on every road. And what passed in April of 2019 is that most people wanted them on select routes, or they wanted them on all roads. And so, as hopefully your next chairman it would be my responsibility to uphold the majority view, which is that most people want them on our public roadways. So I would be not a good person if I didn't uphold what the majority wanted, even if it might not be my personal opinion, but it's still what the majority wants. So that's what my responsibility would be, is to respond to the majority of residents who do want them. It is painful to me that on social media and other sites that I have continually been, I guess there's a lot of misinformation that somehow I'm going to take away this now privilege, and nothing can be further from the truth. So I guess if someone's listening and they're being told that as chairperson I will take this privilege away, they are simply stated lying to you about that, because that's not what people have said. The majority of people have said this is what they want, and so this is what I would uphold, unless somehow public opinion would change. And I don't think it will. I think the county now has opened up the county roads to ATVs and UTVs, so therefore it's very easy for the town of Grant to continue now what the county and the county residents are also saying that they want. And my guess is that other communities like Buena Vista that doesn't have roads open, or even the town of Grand Rapids, they also may consider making changes within their community, because that's what the people want. So I want that to be clear to anybody who's listening, that this is a complex issue, but I have heard what the majority wants, and they want ATVs and UTVs on public roadways. So hopefully that's something that's here to stay, and that's something that, if that's what the majority continue to wish, then that I will uphold that. The second issue, if it's okay, may I continue, is that of 2 Mile Creek, which for years, even decades, has flooding issues. There are homes that are, in the northern part of the town along 2 Mile that I suppose a builder of today, or maybe a builder of yesterday, should have said that this wasn't a good place to build a home. These areas are prone to flooding. The 2 Mile Creek itself, one could argue, is not a navigable waterway. It was not considered as to be part of the Portage County Drainage District. And the fact of the matter is that it's prone to flooding. And so the homes that were along there, or are along there, oftentimes have terrible flooding issues. And the complex part of that is that what is the town's responsibility to protect these homes from flooding? And unfortunately, the responsibility for the town kind of ends outside of the right-of-way. So 33 feet from the center line in most cases, we're done. So when you start walking down a creek, you can walk down a creek because that's a public waterway, but you can't walk above the creek because now you're on private land. And the private landowners were very upset that the town wasn't preventing their homes from flooding. And we were limited to a certain extent of what we could legally do. We were able to access information from Extension, from the university. We had a number of scientists that were looking at the LIDAR data to see where the trouble was coming from. Some would argue that some of it was coming upstream. It was coming from some of the agricultural areas because the silt was kind of building up to make these kind of blockages and dams, for lack of a better word. In the end, I wasn't terribly helpful, unfortunately, to the, personally maybe, to the folks that were up on the northern part of the town. And it still requires more work. And the current board, in my opinion, did something that what I question a little bit, I guess to this day, is that they did use public funds to hire an engineering firm for what was a private matter, which is that stream along and against private homes. So they were able to provide, I think, relevant information for the town, but it isn't and wasn't something necessarily that the town should have paid for. So that's something that I still question. I assume now that things are better. I know there were a lot of people involved in helping to get some of the debris out of the creek. So hopefully this spring things will be better. But it's still a complex issue. It's a complex hydrogeological issue that needs probably a lot more work by not only the people that live there, but the scientists who can help us and the agricultural growers who can help us make that better. Okay, that's a really good question too. And we've talked about the issues of groundwater before in the town of Grant. Because we're in sand, sand doesn't have a great ability to attenuate pollutants. In other words, it can just really start running. If anyone knows, if you put something in sand, it can go through pretty fast. So we have a vulnerability to pollutants. And some of the simplest ones and things you can get for free is like simple nitrate testing. And I think there has been an effort currently underway by our volunteer, Cecile Johnson, to get nitrate testing done even on election day, where people can bring in a small sample to see if they test positive, to see if they test high for nitrate. And if you have nitrate levels that are more than 10 parts per million, it may not be something dangerous for adults, but it can be dangerous for infants, particularly those 6 months or younger. It can cause something known as metahemoglobinemia, which is blue baby syndrome, where they have an inability to transport oxygen properly because of the nitrate levels that might be in the water. Really important that well water around here be tested for nitrate, particularly if you're a new mother or have a young baby. So that is important for me, nitrate testing for sure. Bacteriological testing or bacteria testing for wells, oftentimes that's done when your home is being built or your home is being sold. Both nitrate and bacteria testing is really important. Should those be available for free? That'd be a great idea. And there are some ways that we can get, if we can't get those for free, then there's ways to get them inexpensively. While I was on the board, there were 2 occasions where we did something known as the homeowner program, and that was a reduced rate on a test that not only include nitrate and bacteria, but it also included things like conductivity, alkalinity, corrosivity. It allowed us to understand what our well water was doing. And because not only are we in these sandy soils, we also have issues with acidic water. So what happens is that things can be really kind of corrosive. So they can be corrosive, particularly if you have copper plumbing and it's got lead solder, so that lead can start, dissolving. There's all kinds of things that can go wrong in the water around here, and many of you have high tannins, you have lots of iron. So the more free testing we could get would be great. There are grants available for that. There are reduced things we can do if lots of us get together and like purchase these homeowner programs, we can get the rate really down to something reasonable. But certainly at a minimum, nitrate testing for if you have young, if you have a baby, that's really an important one. And bacteriological testing also for the same reason. So those bacteria, nitrate, really important. Free would be great. But then other reduced rates, if we do it as a community, we can get rates really low and do it something. It should be something that people are doing every 15 months. If you're worried that somehow your well results will be made public, our homeowner programs that we've done in the past, what we did is all your well results were private, so they were given to you privately, but we had someone from UW Extension give a informational session to explain what your results mean, and then would work with you individually on your individual results so that you understand what they mean. It is important. It's really a public health and safety issue to make sure that the well water you're drinking, and we all use well water here, is important and safe to drink. Okay, so local roads and the transfer station. I already talked about local roads. I would continue to write grants. But I was thinking a lot about this, and I wonder if we might have something like quadrant leaders or an ad hoc road committee that would be able to report back to even though it's the town board's responsibility to make sure that the roads are okay, but sometimes people that are living throughout the town, and we're so big that I'm wondering if it might be helpful for us to have even folks, and we did have this for a short time when I was on the board, to have like another committee that just reports to the board about areas of concern that maybe we're missing. So as I mentioned before, the important thing is to have somebody on the board that is able to write road grants. That's absolutely pivotal. And work with some of our county and state leaders and road workers that help us obtain those grants. That's important. And also working with some of our local engineers to help us in the more complex grants, because some of these aren't easy to write. I'm not a civil engineer, so I had to ask for a lot of advice if I didn't understand things. So that's important. The transfer station is, to me, one of the greatest places in the town. It's kind of the social hub of our community. We're lucky to have a transfer station because even though it might be inconvenient for people to load up their garbage and recycling, once or twice a week or once a month, however often you go there, the great thing about it is it keeps our rates very low. For us, for less than $100, well, this year it was the first time it was over $100, but basically $100 a year, you can take your recycling, you can take your garbage, you can take your fluorescent tubes, you can take your oil. Once or twice a year, you can bring your tires, you can have a choose to reuse program. These are great opportunities that larger municipalities don't have. They have to pay as you go, or they have a white goods day and you have to pay for those things separately. We don't have to, have a lot of those extra expenses. There are some things you have to pay for when you bring in, but it's small compared to larger communities. I think there are great ways we can improve the transfer station. For years, I wanted to have like some kind of cement base or some kind of more firm base for our rollaway containers that'll make it safer to walk on. Have a little, be just safer so that people aren't walking in some of the gravel or the granite material and getting wet or it's slippery and icy. There are other communities that do some amazing things at their transfer station. They have building material exchange days, or they have paint exchange days, or they have more larger choose to reuse events or continuous choose to reuse events, or they have all kinds of innovative exchanges or fundraisers or all kinds of things that help out different, more extensive tire days. I think the innovations in recycling now are quite amazing, and we really need to tip our hat to the good job that we do in the town of Grant. The per capita required rate for recycling is 84 pounds per capita, and in the town of Grant, we're almost 350 pounds per capita. It's one of the highest rates in the state. We've received award from the Department of Natural Resources for our recycling rates, and we need to thank our workers, our part-time workers that work out there, and the town of Grant people themselves for doing a good job of recycling. And we can even do better. So I think the transfer station can lend itself to all kinds of creative ideas. So I'm kind of excited about that. I miss working with the employees there and overseeing the operations of that. So I think there's all kinds of cool ideas we could employ. Well, when I was on the board, beginning in 2006, I started a town newsletter. They had something years ago, but I restarted a town newsletter, and unfortunately the current board disbanded that. Not everybody has a computer. Some people still get the newspaper every day. They liked getting the newsletter. They liked getting a postcard telling them what was going on. So I think we need to retain and bring back print media for those who prefer that method. I think we absolutely must. Oh, and while I was on the board, we did start our town website. Kathy Lee does an expert job of keeping the town website current. It's great to look at. I think that's one that we absolutely must maintain. So that's another way. Some people prefer only getting their information that way. I know that one of our candidates, Heather Grys-Luecht, really pressed the current board on having Zoom meetings, and she's been able to set those up three times now, and I think that is a wonderful thing to have, not just because of COVID, but it's something we should continue. Some people don't want to go out on a wintry night, or they just prefer the comfort of their own home. They want to attend the meetings, but they want a different format. I think we have to have that kind of format continue to exist for our constituents to be able to hear what's going on, ask questions if they have them. The website is great, but maybe we want to move to Facebook and other formats. And I know there's many, not all of which I use, but I think there are other formats, particularly for our younger folks, that they use those every day and they would prefer that kind of format. I would like to see whatever media formats are available to us to use them and employ them, because the more people we engage, the more people we empower, the more people we have interested, and the more people can help our community in positive ways. So, hey, if it's print, if it's TV, if it's radio, if it's on the computer, if it's on your smartphone, whatever mechanism we can get to the people, I think we should employ. Well, I think people should vote for me, or hopefully will vote for me, is I have the experience. As I said in my candidate statement, that is a written statement that's on the town website, is that I've had the great opportunity of working at every level of government. I've worked for the federal, the state, the county, and at a local government level. I've also worked in many years in the nonprofit arena as well. So I have a great deal of professional experience at different levels of government that makes it easy for me to move in and out of different levels of government if I have questions. I have 14 years of experience, previous experience as your town chairperson, and even though it was frustrating and exhausting at times, I also loved almost every minute of it. It was challenging, it was exhilarating, I learned something almost every day, and I got to engage with a lot of the wonderful people that live here. I think you should vote for me because I answer your calls. I kind of enjoyed that the most, is when people would call. Sometimes I couldn't help, but at least I got to talk to people and learned about what their concerns are. I just hope that people that have worked with me in the past, who have called me in the past, will trust me again to help take care of your health, safety, and welfare. I hope you will not listen to the misinformation or the social media rumors that are flying about certain issues. I invite you to call me or visit if you have questions or concerns about what I might or might not do. But I think my experience, my leadership, the civility that I've shown in the past, my honesty, my integrity, I have ethics. I don't really color outside the lines when it comes to local government. We have the state statutes, we're supposed to follow them, and that's what I hope to continue to do on your behalf. Last, I'd like to again thank Wisconsin Rapids Community Media and the Wisconsin Rapids League of Women Voters. I was sorry to hear that my opponent declined to give an interview for media today. I think this in itself shows that I'm willing to talk to you, and I hope you'll talk to me and vote for me.